What if Ahsoka became the Mandalore? Part 3. After the skirmish on Agmar and the confrontation with Darth Vader, Ahsoka could barely function for several days. Upon getting back to the LAATs that day, she learned that an Imperial fleet had arrived in orbit and their vendor had disengaged to avoid being destroyed. Fighters still managed to rendezvous with them and safely escort the LAATs back to the vendor, which led him behind Agmar's moon, before they jumped back to Mandalore. The clones had only been able to find a few dozen survivors, which they brought with them, but Rex there told her that 11 troopers were missing. They had been the ones that put themselves between her and Darth Vader. It was a small number, considering what they had faced, but they are still men. Men who had given their lives to protect her from Anakin. She had once trusted and had a complete faith in him, but he had not only joined the Sith, but attacked her and the men they had once led. The reality of it was harsh, along with what she forced herself to accept. That thing was no longer Anakin. Anakin had died with the other Jedi. Ahsoka had already mourned and grieved for him. That monster was Darth Vader, the one that had killed Anakin, and she would kill him to avenge him. After a few days coming to terms with this, Ahsoka led a small group of clones back to Agmar in a shuttle, her heart not allowing her to forget the men who had given their lives for her in her moment of hesitation and weakness. Thankfully, the Empire had since left and, sadly but fortunately, all 11 slain troopers are still in the square where they had fallen. She helped collect their bodies, where they were then transported back to Mandalore to put to rest. Ahsoka finally told Rex who Darth Vader was almost 2 weeks after the incident, and he too was troubled and shaken by the revelation. Soon after, the 1-year anniversary of the founding of the Empire came. As the galaxy celebrated, Ahsoka spent the day in isolation, grieving and hating everything that had happened. On that day, she resolved that from then on, she would double down her efforts on revenge. But the recent loss also reminded her of her people, the clones, and the young Jedi that entrusted their lives to her. So, Ahsoka went about doing her best to separate her revenge from them, while at the same time trying her hardest to make their lives better. She often went out into the galaxy alone now, something that Rex, Cody, Wolf, and many others were uneasy with. However, even if they didn't know the details, they knew that something had happened, and understood that she needed some time and space. In this time, she hunted down every Inquisitor she could, killing them all. She had no mind for mercy, hating them for joining the Sith. The ones that were already captured were a liability anyway. It was only because Rex protested against killing them that they were still alive. Most of the Inquisitors she encountered didn't even try to surrender anyway. Their desperate attempts to kill her, making her choice to kill them to feel all the more justified. Her warpath usually didn't end with them though. If any Imperial soldiers got on her way, then they were as good as dead as well. This thankfully most only happened when she confronted them when they're inside an Imperial base. It went on like this for several months, to the point that the Empire began to deploy countermeasures, all while it became a new routine for Ahsoka. It started with her fervently finishing what was needed for her on Mandalore, then proceeding to scour the galaxy, hunting the Inquisitors. As she blazed across the galaxy, she unfortunately had found herself having to go further, and spend more time tracking each Inquisitor, with their presence becoming fainter as their numbers drastically decreased. During one excursion, Ahsoka caught wind of a pair of Inquisitors and began following them in earnest, excited for their upcoming fights. Finally catching up with them on Omwat, she learned they were after a young, Force-sensitive child. Instead of taking or killing the child though, to Ahsoka's surprise, one of the Inquisitors instead put themselves between them and their partner. A duel started, which disappointed Ahsoka. She had wanted them to fire in unison. It was too late for that, so she figured it was best to just end it and get back to Mandalore. Quickly approaching them, she promptly killed the attacking Inquisitor before raising the lightsaber to do the same to the other one. However, when Ahsoka looked at the face of the person who friended the child, she froze. It was the face of a person who had once been her friend, a person she had thought she had known so well. That is, until she had framed her. Barriss stared back her, equally shocked. Perhaps it was something to be expected now. Everyone close to her had betrayed her, whether willingly or not, from the Jedi to Rex and even Anakin. Barriss made no move against her, instead only calling out to her in a soft, shaky voice. It was the first time Ahsoka had hesitated to kill anyone since she had learned of who Darth Vader had been. Her hand shook as she held her lightsaber ready, her heart and mind waging a war against each other. Ahsoka closed her eyes, letting her arm drop and lightsaber reignite. She couldn't bring herself to kill Barriss. Together, though reluctantly, they made sure the child and their family was safe, Ahsoka offered them refuge though they declined. After they disposed of the other Inquisitor, back at Ahsoka's shuttle, they sat together. The silence eventually drove them to share their stories from when they had last seen each other. Barriss starts, first telling her time in prison, of how she became an Inquisitor and the life she had been living since. When she finished, Ahsoka talked about her time in the Undercity of Coruscant, the fight for Mandalore, and, though hesitantly, about a new role in people. They spent a couple of days there, trying to come to terms with the situation and reconcile, or at least establish a fragile trust. Eventually, Ahsoka finally decided that she needed to get back to Mandalore and asked if Barriss would like to come as well. During all this, Ahsoka felt no dark presence from Barriss, and it appeared she had been honest with her. It made Ahsoka truly begin to trust her again, even if it was precarious. Barriss agreed to come, not having anywhere else to go, or knowing what else to do. On the way, Ahsoka gave Barriss one of her spare sets of clothes, urging her to change out of her Inquisitor uniform. She knew that several of the Padawans as well as the clones would not take kindly to having the Inquisitor amongst them. Also, not knowing what else to do, when they arrived on Mandalore, Ahsoka took Barriss straight to her residence in Tundari. After Ahsoka caught up on her work, they talked more and Barriss assured her that the only individuals that knew she had been Inquisitor were fellow Inquisitors and those associated. Though there were a few clones that might know, since they took her to the Inquisitor facility from the prison. She also promised that she hadn't attacked any Jedi, the mission Ahsoka found her on being one of her first. Ahsoka gave her a short tour after this assurance, but she still had a hard time completely trusting her. So, she told Bo-Katan, Rex, and a few others about who she had been. Rex wasn't all too keen on letting her stay, not only because she had become an Inquisitor, but also because she had tried to frame Ahsoka, already proving that she couldn't be trusted. His misgivings almost made Ahsoka change her mind, but in the end, she allowed her to stay. This stemmed from a deep desire to have another connection to her past self and the Jedi, her nostalgia of the good days, and wanting her instincts in faith to be right and well placed, even if it meant accepting Barriss. She had also already forgiven her for attempting to frame her. She knew that Barriss wasn't evil, just misguided, and it turned out she had been right about the Jedi. This didn't excuse her actions, but it gave Ahsoka hope that she still knew who Barriss truly was, especially with her recent actions. Still, she broke a new routine and stayed at Mandalore for the time being, using her duties as an excuse to watch her. This put to a stop though when Barriss' Inquisitorious communication device lit up. Ahsoka quickly found Barriss, having her answer it. When she did, a man's voice came from the other end, telling her to come back to Amwat, or not only would the young child and their family be killed, but also every person in the area. The communication cut off there, leaving a torn look on Barriss' face. She told Ahsoka that was a Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple guard, and a man who had gained Darth Sidious's trust. She could tell that Barriss didn't want to go, but Ahsoka was already preparing to leave for Amwat. It wasn't to save lives. Now that could be a benefit. If that was really the Grand Inquisitor, then she wanted to kill him. Perhaps she could keep him alive for a little bit though. There was no telling what information about the Empire he knew. As Barriss saw what she was doing, she told her that she would accompany her. Ahsoka didn't argue, part of her thinking that this was a good way to test her, though she didn't give her lightsaber back, having taken it before coming to Mandalore. Instead, she contacted Rex and, using the previously captured Inquisitor shuttle and one of theirs, they went to the Garrish sector. It was the first time since Agmar that Ahsoka brought the clones with her, and it comforted Rex that she was perhaps starting to rely on others again. Arriving over Amwat, the second shuttle broke off to provide support, while they landed the Inquisitor shuttle near the home of the child and their family. Ahsoka and Barriss walked down the ramp together and found the Grand Inquisitor waiting for them with 2 other Inquisitors and a handful of soldiers. These soldiers were different than TK troopers, but their armor appeared to be a mix between the clones and TKs. Whoever they were, it didn't concern Ahsoka as she ignited her lightsabers. The Grand Inquisitor laughed as she did this before he greeted her by name. She wasn't bothered that he knew her, it just annoyed her that he didn't see her as a threat. He started talking, but before he could even say a few words, Ahsoka was on him. He just barely had time to ignite his lightsaber, managing to block her before she could cough his head. The people around him hurriedly backed away, giving them space to fight. The Grand Inquisitor was still confident, smiling, and relaxed as he attempted to taunt her. His smile soon faded though, along with his taunts, as she drove him back. His defenses were quickly crumbling under her onslaught. Ahsoka had been a formidable fighter even before, but now that she had started using her deep emotion to fuel her, her form 5 was all the more devastating. She finally aimed for his lightsaber, a big target and weakness that she learned all Inquisitors had, managing to successfully slash it, rendering it useless. The Grand Inquisitor jumped away as her lightsaber neared to cut him once again. He shouted at the soldiers and the other 2 Inquisitors, telling them to kill her. They complied, though Ahsoka could see the visible hesitation before they moved towards her. He also yelled to Barriss, urging her to attack Ahsoka, and that if she did, then she would become his second and be given great power. Ahsoka only had time to cast a glance back at Barriss, who had a terrified expression, before she was blocking both blaster shots and lightsabers. The Grand Inquisitor was idle for only a moment before she saw him run to a shuttle. He was trying to escape. Ahsoka could hardly believe it. She threw herself at the soldiers and Inquisitors, shocking them with her rashness and throwing them out of her way. She wouldn't let him escape. However, they still managed to delay her and buy just enough time for the shuttle to take off. Ahsoka stared up at it as the clone subdued all further resistance, arresting all the surviving soldiers. Just as her shoulders slumped to her feet, motion caught her attention, and before she could blink, a rock hit the Grand Inquisitor's shuttle, causing it to turn into a massive fireball and crash back into the ground. Looking to where the rock had been fired from, she found some of the clones that had been assigned Overwatch from the second shuttle. Ahsoka was slightly angry that she hadn't been the one to kill the Grand Inquisitor, and that they couldn't capture him, but forced herself to let it go. This was better than him getting away. She finally looked at Barriss again, who appeared not to have moved the entire time. Perhaps I was better than her betraying Ahsoka again, but Ahsoka still took note of her inaction. The trip back to Mandalore was silent, but Barriss was still trembling the entire time. The family with the Force Sensitive child also chose to go with them this time, realizing the danger they were in. As days passed, Ahsoka tries to keep close with Barriss, but her hesitation to act had hurt her. Did she hesitate to help her, or hesitate to kill her? She did soon receive some good news though, that being that the Kaminoans had successfully figured out how to stop the clone's accelerated aging. After thoroughly verifying that it was in fact a cure and not something else, it began mass production, and the clones began receiving it. There were worries about who would receive it first amongst the clones. Though effort was being focused on creating enough, it was still likely to take several more months to create and administer them all. Ahsoka simply told Rex and the rest of the commanders that priority would begin with the oldest. This obviously also prioritized experience the majority of the time, allowing the most seasoned men that had seen the most to continue their service. However, this excluded any clone that wasn't with them, whether they were still within the Empire, in another organization, or if they had settled down. The ones that had settled down would get it, Ahsoka promised, but only after everyone else. Rex was part of the first batch to get it, along with Cody, Wolf, and the clone commandos. This way of doing it was also mostly accepted by the clones, who not only trusted her, but also figured it was a few more months. As the clone situation got sorted out, Ahsoka tried to spend more time with Barriss, trying to get to know her again, and hopefully help her heal. Upon a closer look, she could tell that her time in the Empire as Inquisitor had scarred her, but was it really enough for her to turn on Ahsoka again? Barriss was mostly cooperative, though it still held off until her more sensitive stuff. They often sparred, ate, and talked together, Barriss even helping Ahsoka in her role as Mandalore and managing the clones. After a while, Ahsoka became sure that Barriss wouldn't intentionally harm anyone, but was still uncertain if she would protect anyone if her life was threatened, or if confronted by those that haunted her. A few of those individuals were already dead, but others still alive, including Darth Vader. If triggered, Barriss was a wild card, though she would probably just freeze, but Ahsoka didn't want to rely on that, so she made sure that someone was always keeping an eye on her. Time passed before anything noteworthy happened, but when it did, it caught Ahsoka off guard. The shuttle appeared in orbit above Mandalore, its occupants insisting that they had a message for Ahsoka. Curious, she allowed them to land, where she greeted them. There was only a single face of the people that came off that was familiar to Ahsoka, it being a face she had seen on Onderon back during the war. She guided them to her office, where she got straight to business, asking what the message was and who it was from. Instead of answering, the familiar face pulled out a hollow recorder and began to play a message. The former Saw Gerrera appeared, who greeted her. He explained that he had been told of some of her exploits, and was curious she would like to join him on a raid against Summit Tarkin was holding on Radu. It worried Ahsoka that he had been able to find her, though it probably was one of the connections she had made out in the galaxy that had told him. However he had found her, this was still something to offer, and she knew that he was wholeheartedly against the Empire. So, she decided to send the messenger back, with her acceptance along with the communication device. After a few days, Saw Gerrera got in contact with her, and they planned to coordinate an attack on Radu. Though they argued on some aspects, it didn't take long to agree on a plan and set a date. When it came near, Ahsoka pressed that Rex watched Barriss while she was gone. He was disappointed that she wasn't taking any clones with her, but her reasoning was that if things went bad, then she could easily escape alone. She didn't care too much about Saw Gerrera and his partisans. They were a rogue unit that caused more damage than showed results. She had clones drop her off on a backwater world where she met Saw Gerrera and his partisans. After some final prep, they then went to Radu. Sneaking onto the planet wasn't that hard. It was an economic center of the region and saw frequently heavy traffic. However, getting to the target, the compound where the privileged admirals and political figures, including Tarkin, were meeting, was a different matter. It had been built deep into the wilderness of Radu and was heavily guarded and monitored. They still managed it, primarily thanks to the preparation of Gerrera and sneaking into the facility, planting explosives on the way in. Splitting up, most of the partisans went to vital infrastructure like power and communications, while others went to the hangars in order to disable the Skyrel. Ahsoka went straight to the conference hall. She wanted these men to die, especially Tarkin. Gerrera wanted it too, but he hadn't been planning on being this bold. There's something that they had disagreed on until Ahsoka volunteered to do it herself. She still held a grudge against Tarkin for when he had attempted to have her executed for the Jedi Temple bombing, and how he had treated her during it. And that was after she had saved his life at the Citadel, no less. He was going to learn the hard way that he should have been grateful, and not become a fanatical Imperial. Ahsoka used events to avoid security and get close, and after letting them gather in the conference room and verifying they're all there, she backtracked and jumped down from the vents in front of the conference room door. The security troopers there, two of which were the new former TKs, were caught off guard and she managed to kill them without alerting anyone. She placed thermal detonators along the entire hallway before hiding back in the vents, waiting for the partisans to detonate their explosives. It took longer than she would have liked, but when they did, she jumped down and went to the conference room door. However, it didn't open. Annoyed, Ahsoka ignited her lightsaber and cut her way through. She didn't cut a big hole, perhaps only big enough for her to fit, but that wasn't the purpose. When metal had dropped into the room beyond had darkened. The window that looked out upon the eroded landscape had been shuttered and the lights dimmed. There was enough light though for her to see the shocked and scared faces beyond. She immediately recognized Tarkin, who also seemed to recognize her as she heard her name come from that horrible mouth. There were no greens though. Instead, she threw the remaining thermal detonators through the hole, propelling them ever with force. Panic shouts ensued, but she was already running down the hallway as she grabbed the remote and activated the thermal detonators. She just managed to get out of the hallway as a fireball engulfed her as what felt like the entire building shook. Putting on a breathing apparatus, she backtracked into the carnage she had caused. The way she had come in with the partisans would be guarded if not collapsed, so from the start she had been planning on just blowing a hole in the facility and leaving it there. With how high up it was, that would be a challenge for a normal person, but she had the force. As she entered the conference room, several charred forms were by the door, waiting for her. Thankfully, the explosion had blown open not only the window, but the entire wall, bathing the gruesome scene in sunlight. She stayed only long enough to verify that Tarkin had been killed before she ran and jumped out the opening. Thankfully, some of the partisans were still waiting for her at a rendezvous point with transportation. They managed to get back to the Radu city where they met with Gerrera. A wide smile spread across his face as he first told her of how much damage his team had caused, before Ahsoka filled him that she had killed all the officials attending, including Tarkin. Her giddiness was short-lived, as she got a surprise communication from Rex, telling her that there was a situation on Mandalore, and that her presence was immediately required. Gerrera wasn't planning to stick around anyway, so he offered her a ride. Coordinating with Rex, they met with a vendor where Gerrera dropped Ahsoka off before going to wherever he was hiding. It was Wolf that had come to pick her up, and he filled her in. They had captured several Imperial spies that managed to make their way onto the planet. They all confessed that they were sent to report the military capabilities of Mandalore, and to sabotage whatever they could when the signal came. They also admitted there were Mandalorians that were helping them. A Mandalorian faction was cooperating with the Empire to usurp Ahsoka as Mandalore. In exchange, the leader of that faction would become the new leader of the Mandalorians under Imperial rule. This filled Ahsoka with rage. She immediately knew they were talking of a Mandalorian clan, and she had some ideas of which one it was. All this could only point to one thing though. The Empire was coming for Mandalore, and it was trying to destroy their ability to fight back before it did so. Perhaps it was finally time for this Empire to burn.